Hello and welcome to today's Missio Nexus webinar. I'm Heather Pubels, the founder of Leitmotif, a communications consulting firm and Missio Nexus member organization. I'm also the editor of Evangelical Missions Quarterly. I'm partnering with Missio Nexus to discover topics and find effective presenters that can address ways mission agencies can improve their marketing and communications efforts. Before we get started with the webinar, I want to let you know that Missio Nexus has a cohort called Communications Director and Staff. If you are involved in marketing or communications with a mission agency, this cohort is for you. It's a great place for you to meet, learn from, and be encouraged by others in your domain. At the end of this webinar, I'll give you instructions on how to find and sign up for that cohort. For today, Dave Weed will be presenting our webinar entitled Foundations for an Effective Communications Department. Dave and his wife Alyssa are the founders of Outward Heart. Outward Heart comes alongside existing and emerging ministries to help equip them to effectively share their purpose and passion. Dave previously worked in marketing and communications for Wycliffe Bible Translators, a marketing agency, and most recently with an organization called Living Hope International. You can learn more about Outward Heart on their website at outwardheart.org. Dave, I was wondering if you could tell us about a current project that you're working on.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me. First of all, it's a privilege to be with you. A first project or a project we're working on right now is for Be Still B&B. We service ministries that are small or emerging in general. And Be Still B&B operates a retreat center locally here in central Wisconsin, where I'm located. But they're actually launching, I'm sure all of your viewers are aware of Airbnb or Vrbo, that concept. But what Be Still B&B is doing is rolling out a national platform where existing vacation properties can donate space to clergy and missionaries to prevent burnout. So Sabbath retreat centers going from their one little facility here in central Wisconsin to a national canvas of hundreds or thousands of hosted sites. So we are in the web development and fundraising stage of that. It's going to be going live this fall. So perhaps some of your viewers today will qualify as members falling under that clergy or missionary status. And so we hope to provide Sabbath rest locations all over the country, potentially the world. We'll start with the country where they can find rest, find reconnection with the Lord, and unplug from their daily responsibilities. So it's kind of a neat project. Most people get a concept of that Airbnb or Vrbo, but we're blowing that up as Sabbath retreat centers around the country where those host facilities can donate space for free to clergy. So avoiding burnout everywhere we can.
I love this, Dave. That is such a cool thing. We're going to have to follow up on that. And
Sure.
I'm sure a lot of other people on here are going to be interested in learning more about that.
Absolutely.
So for everyone, just remember to please put your questions in the chat panel as you think of them, as Dave does his presentation. We'll get to as many of them as we can. And Dave, it's great to have you here with us today, and welcome.
All right. Well, thank you very much again for having me. I'm going to go through, I'm not assuming a whole lot about your audience. I'm kind of assuming a lower level of, maybe not giant, robust teams that have everything at their disposal, but rather how to work and keep our eyes on some of the basics. And so I'm just kind of giving a little context for our ministry. Our ministry is called Outward Heart, and that idea that man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And that idea that there's so many ministries or organizations doing amazing heart work, but yet it's man who sees the outside. And so that which they put forward is all that the outside world has as a perspective, as a first impression, or as a vision or a mission sharing method. And so it is important what it looks like. We serve a God of quality, accuracy, credibility, provision, but so oftentimes our ministries don't reflect that. And that's by no fault of the ministries oftentimes, that if they're an author or a missionary, a teacher, they're ministering to disabled or imprisoned individuals, their calling isn't to be a marketer, nor is it our job to teach them to be marketers. We don't need to teach them necessarily to work without or outside of their strengths and their experience. But that is what God called us to. So we walk with people for a season to help them kind of mine and excavate that which is at the heart of different ministries. So that's kind of the concept. So to kind of boil it down, we help ministries get ready to go out in public. So, so often they've got this great heart thing. They just need a little bit of, metaphorical, their hair combed and their teeth brushed before they head out into the world to present that which God has laid on their hearts. So the main question is, what is at the heart of your ministry? And so that's what we're going to look to unpack. We're not going to dig into that specifically today, but that's what you need to be filtering pretty much everything through, is what is at the heart of your ministry. And really the idea is that you need to believe in your vision. Maybe that goes without saying, but if God called you to it, he'll provide you through it and provide for that. And I was reminded recently that we don't need to fight for God's promises. We just need to follow and obey. That we just need to take those steps that he lays before us. I was working with a client recently who in his publication or his distribution had the line, "We can't do this without you," to his constituents. And boy, that just kind of hurt. That puts the shame and sort of the onus on the readers. But a better perspective that I was able to share with him is, look, God laid this on our hearts. God is going to do this. Will you partner with it? Do you want to be part of it? You don't want to miss out. Almost feeding that FOMO kind of a concept of you want to and you should want to be part of this, not we can't do this without you, kind of that desperation or shame game. And so we just want to make sure that you believe in the vision. And if that's not you, maybe that's your leadership, you need to be on board with that, and you need to grasp and really appreciate and press forward with the vision of your organization. One thing we're going to talk about, I'm going to mention it a few times throughout the time today, is the 3 I's. That's inspire, inform, and engage. And I realize engage starts with an E, so anyway, maybe you'll remember it because of that. Maybe you'll forget it because of that. But that idea to inspire first, to draw people in using emotional language, powerful quotes, heartfelt photos, intrigue, pique curiosity, really to inspire up front, then to inform, then to kind of fill in with the context. And this goes with writing, with speaking, with events, with everything. The same sort of priority should come into play. That inform level is where sort of the nuts and bolts and how you do it, the background, the history of your organization come into play. But then the engage component, now that they've seen the inspiration, they see the nuts and bolts, the practicality of it, now they can engage with clear steps. And so they can see themselves at that point as the reader, as the audience, and as a potential partner in that which you're presenting. One thing, I forgot, I was going to have a copy of the book, but it's on screen. So the Strengths Finder is something that a lot of people are familiar with. It's kind of that assessment of sort of personality drivers. There's, I know, spiritual strength finders that kind of overlap and overlay with this, but an important part of kind of building your team and understanding what you've got is kind of understanding the different personalities and experiences, but also knowing what you're not. And some of these things, as we're going to go through, maybe categorically, you'll say, you know what, we're just not there. We can concede that area, or we just can't pull that off right now. That's fine. Again, God will provide if he's called you to this. And so, there's a few that I highlighted here. And as I go through what I call the matrix in the following slides, we're going to highlight all kinds of elements or sort of cells that kind of resonate with different areas or categories. But not all the same person is going to excel at those tasks. Someone who's real analytical, like is highlighted here, they may not be your writer or your photographer, but they may really help you with your data administration or your communication side. That's maybe your writer. Maybe they need to pair up with your ideation person to really get some fresh perspectives and to tell the story in a new way. If harmony is something that is really important to you as either a leader or as a team leader, maybe you're going to have troubles critiquing or editing people's stuff or materials because you don't want to ruffle any feathers. You kind of need to maybe migrate some of that responsibility to someone that isn't. They'll still do it in love, but to approach what needs to be fixed. And the woo is kind of famous in this kind of assessment space. That's winning others over. It's the acronym in the list of that's your outgoing, bubbly person. And so you're going to need a woo for some of these things as well. Maybe that's not you, but it's someone that you know, and you probably know who they are already. And so, anyway, we're going to kind of move forward. One of my strengths personally is I'm a maximizer. I like to make efficient. I'm entrepreneurial. I'm always looking for faster, better ways to do things. And so this is just my rule. It's maybe not the 30-minute rule, but it's my 30-minute rule that if a task is going to take more than 30 minutes, you should employ technology or a specialist to do it. And that doesn't mean you need to go get, some custom app built or, rally all your volunteers, but if you're just sorting information or need to update something, it could be as simple as understanding or having someone who knows spreadsheet formulas to sort your data differently or properly so it can be merged into a design document, creating templates rather than creating them over and over again. So just kind of that general rule of, boy, if I'm burning away more than 30 minutes on something, I bet there's a faster way. Maybe it's a Photoshop action that's applying filters or doing things in the background. And so always be thinking that if it's going to bog you down, think of a better way to do it or ask around to see if someone's got a better insight for that. So now we're going to kind of jump into the matrix. It's not anything real formal, but it's kind of a growing set of resources, sort of tools that make up a good communications department. And again, some of these are tools, some of these are just kind of things to keep your eye on. It's pretty robust and comprehensive, like it says, and ever expanding, but it's never complete. Right now, you're just seeing the top slice of that. You see some color coding there, red being sort of indicating, okay, these are the non-negotiables. So as you are setting up or as you are assessing your department, some of these red items are things that you really need to be at least handling or aware of or seeking the right people to manage those areas. The yellow things on the list here are maybe a little bit more of that kind of next level, a little bit more holistic approach to marketing and some of the tools and some of those levels. And then green, there's not a lot of green on here, but the green kind of indicates some of those sort of a really holistic approach or a little bit more advanced. But we're going to kind of camp out in some of the red items. We're just going to kind of go through sort of the high level category of the matrix. And so these are the category listings, the headings, and there is a handout that'll be available. So you don't need to remember all of this or make all the notes that you might think you need. But we're going to go through these real quick now, and then I'll kind of jump into each of them. But branding, kind of your logo and the rules about your brand, text content, some kind of basics about how to manage kind of some of your writing energies and efforts. Multimedia content, we'll touch on that a little bit. Correspondence, kind of your two-way communications, your customer service and things like that. Your digital footprint kind of implying, kind of the social media spaces, website, even your video channels and things like that, where the world finds you. Stationery and literature, it's going to vary by organization. That's your brochures and just kind of your print materials. Campaigns, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of those spikes in awareness or new rollouts of different programs or months or seasons of focus. Accounting, again, I'm kind of assuming there's very little resources available. There's little resources available in Outward Heart. We're a small organization, so accounting kind of, we handle some of that. And a lot of it does ripple into the communication side of things. Then events. Events are a great way to raise awareness and funds for your ministry. Tools, these are more of the digital tools and some of the tricks and kind of software bits. Annual planning and just the importance of making sure you've got a plan going into the year. Equipment, that one's going to really vary quite a bit by organization, but I kind of touch on a few things that to consider to have in place. And then marketing, we'll talk about. Marketing, again, could be a whole department, a whole large area of emphasis in your ministry or your organization, but we'll just touch on a couple of things. And then in-person advocacy is something that we'll touch on as well. So we're going to jump right in. We're going to go to branding. Branding is basically just having a look and a feel that's united, that is, you identify with. And on your screen, you see the Be Still B&B, the kind of that kickoff client that we're working with. And so kind of what does the logo look like? And do you have a professional logo? In their case, the logo is kind of that pinpoint of a location. In the blurb, is that a power outlet of recharging? Is it a pause where you're kind of putting life on pause for a minute? Kind of the soothing blue, the grays, it's kind of that feeling. What does that emit? What kind of emotion? It may not say the 1,000 words that are in the block there, but that idea of it starts to tell your story. That's your curb appeal. So if you've overlooked your brand or think, oh, we're a ministry, it shouldn't matter what it looks like. Well, it does matter, because that's what the outward world sees. And so that is important. Damascus Way, the other logo on screen there, is for inmates as they're reintegrating back into society. And so theirs takes a little bit more of a tattoo-esque feel, but it's a fellowship group in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where inmates can really plug back into fellowship and be received and find community. So that idea is just to kind of develop that identity. Most of you probably have a brand in place already, but maybe some of these items that we go through will kind of prime you or kind of nudge you a little bit to establish maybe some more formal processes and things within your ministry. We're going to talk about brand and style guides, as well as some writing rules and some photo styling. So I'm going to start with the brand and style guides. So again, this is just a super simple one-page document. So go multiply, for example, it basically just shows, okay, this is how you use the logo. This is how you would steward the brand. And this is a super basic brand. You know, they don't have taglines. They don't have sub ministries pictured. It does have in red, you see sort of the breathing space, some do's and don'ts of shadows and mixing colors and fonts and things. So that's just kind of a one page. At the very least, you should have some sort of basically a rule book to the brand, and make sure everyone on your team is up to speed on, okay, is that a proper use of our colors and spatial relationships and things like that. On the right side of your screen, you see Love Inc. That's a national organization in the US that's got affiliate offices all over the country. And so they've got a little more robust manual. They actually just did a rebrand recently. That's an organization that we're working with here locally. But they've got, it's a 30+ page document that really talks about, okay, this is when you reverse text. This is the kind of photo. This is the relationship. These colors should be paired. These should be avoided. They really dive in pretty deep on some of that. So it can really be, robust or basic, but it's important to have some rule book for your brand. When we look at writing rules, oftentimes we really suggest that people have a default set. So that default might be Associated Press or Chicago style, or, there's a few different styles out there. We've kind of settled on the Christian Writer's Manual of Style. It's sort of a mashup of a couple of the more mainline writing style books, but then of course it's for Christian writers. And so it's got a lot more of the nuanced usage of both scripture quotation. It's got a whole, I don't know, probably 20 pages of just capitalization. Do you capitalize gospel or do you not? Do you capitalize good news or the pronouns of God? And so it really just kind of gets everybody on the same playing field in terms of, okay, what is our go-to, or how do we abbreviate this or that? All of your writers and all of your publications and production can really fall in that same kind of rule book. Beyond that, we recommend an in-house style guide. So we've got a client who loves to capitalize the word disciple. It's a very important term to him as a noun, because there's verbs and adjectives of disciple too. But as a noun, we capitalize disciple for him. Or, there's even things like, okay, how do we refer to the Holy Spirit? Is it the Holy Spirit, or is, Holy Spirit will, we're without the, or is it the Comforter, or is it the Holy Ghost? Yeah, you could say they're kind of all sort of the same, but you've probably got a default that you as a leader of your organization or leader of your department might say, let's make the Holy Spirit our go-to. That way, when a writer submits a draft and they frequently use Holy Ghost this or Holy Ghost that, it's like, okay, well, we prefer Holy Spirit. Then you've got an in-house guide that would have told them that proactively. So you're not assuming that they're going to make the right default decision on some of those things. So again, just some basic stuff, but to have a default and an in-house style guide. Photographic style is another way that you can kind of start to build your brand. In this particular example, there's a little bit of a vignette, sort of kind of shading around the corners, even a texture. It's kind of a mesh that's faded out in the middle. And then there's an overlay of blue that just kind of gives it a little bit of a cast. And what that can do is it can unify, kind of like it says, their diverse subject matter to kind of feel like your brand. So here's that same filter applied to what was a photorealistic kind of toning of a gentleman speaking to a group, but it kind of feels a little bit like that tone, as well as, okay, here you get some children running down a trail barefooted. You don't see that mesh a whole lot. You do in the lower left corner, but it's just kind of got a little bit of that cast. And so just kind of the photographic style can unite diverse content. Another good example of that is Spotify. So maybe it says 2015 year in music. I know Spotify has migrated from this treatment a little bit, but if you think of all the albums and authors and artists who are sending in content to Spotify, that was their approach. Let's just make duotone high contrast images that neutralizes everybody's unique art and style to look like the Spotify brand. So that's what I feel is a really good example to kind of say, how can you apply a filter or a method to unify very diverse photographic material. So then we'll move on to the next category, text content. And you probably have a mission and a vision statement for your organization, but a lot of times those get a little flowery, a little bit deep, or you're trying to be all-encompassing or kind of poetic. And so those are important, but also a summary statement, I would say, kind of like, here's our mission, here's our vision. In other words, what? And so have that sort of in other words version of what is our go-to. How do we describe or explain ourselves in layman's terms? Or if we had to explain this to, a 12-year-old, they might not get your mission and vision and understand what you mean by some of the terms or the Christianese that's laced in a mission or vision, but give that, in other words, idea some thought. And then Heather, you at Leitmotif, I think kind of gave me the idea to include this, to have 3 to 5 inspirational flagship articles, things that you've kind of poured some significant energy into to really carefully draft and craft and refine, that really tell your story well. And so, yes, you may be either cranking out articles or testimonies or case studies pretty regularly as a ministry, but have your flagship ones ready, those to send to an article submission, an opportunity to have as sort of maybe your anchor information on your website, to be sort of your lead. And I like that idea of having just a few really just kind of go-to articles. Proofreading, it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it, get your stuff proofread and have a process for it. Our policy is if more than 10 people are going to see something, it needs to go through revision and proofing process. And furthermore, it needs 3 sign-offs. And so, really a great idea is to bring in outside eyes. Include a couple of people outside of your ministry to be on your proofreading team. That way, as you get more and more maybe ingrained in internal language or vernacular or acronyms, those people can say, hey, wait, I don't know what MMD is, and I don't know what WBT is. And so you get a little bit of that pushback, but it really helps you keep your message really accessible to all audiences, so you don't kind of start to turn internal with some of your language or things like that. And so have a policy in place. We use Google Docs in suggestion mode. It's super basic and pretty available. Most people know how to use that, but there's a lot of different proofing methods out there, Whipster and others, that might be a resource for you. And again, as you're writing, remember those 3 eyes, 2 eyes and an E, to inspire, then inform, and then have that engagement opportunity. So always remembering the 3 eyes. Multimedia, we're not going to camp out here too much, but know that video, we live obviously in a video world, as evidenced through YouTube, TikTok, and all the new platforms that are springing up, and just the prevalence of video on phones and sharing. But understanding the channel platform strengths. So how does YouTube differ from Rumble, differ from Vimeo, differ from these different platforms? Things like downloadability. Is there going to be censorship that's applied? Is there going to be is going to be searched? Google and YouTube is going to have the most search friendly video kind of features. So some of that stuff you just want to keep in mind, knowing that the answer is probably to have a presence on all of them. Maybe not all of your same videos on all, but maybe, if it's a tutorial or a training video series, Vimeo might be a good solution, so they can be downloading those and using them locally with their team or whatever. So anyway, just knowing the strengths of those. And the same with photography, again, going back to kind of fitting in the multimedia space. But keep in mind, you don't need to always be watermarking and having, all these kind of dramatic claims and kind of overdoing and over branding, but yet simple intros and outros will really kind of set the stage for and establish both an expectation and can really bookend some video footage. So, I've got the logos on screen there. Maybe you're kind of already visioning the Paramount stars kind of whooshing into that half circle, or the DreamWorks bobber landing in the water and rippling, or the MGM lion roaring. So just those kind of unifying kind of bookend things. These movie studios put time and energy into those because it's kind of putting their stamp on, saying, okay, I approve of this. So as you develop video or other multimedia content, keep in mind that's a good way just to kind of kick it off, and then the content can kind of vary, but you've at least set the stage for, okay, what is the framework? What is the brand that this is living within? We're going to jump to correspondence. Correspondence is kind of that two-way again. It's that customer service side. You're going to be receiving calls, inbound emails, solicitations, inquiries, different partnership opportunities. And so you just want to always, this again goes without saying, but you just want to treat those with the utmost of professionalism. You don't know who's on the other end, who's going to get copied on something. And so it is important to put your best foot forward there, that if you're speaking on behalf of the ministry, you're really speaking on behalf of the vision, the heart. And again, we serve a God of quality, credibility, respect. So you want to make sure you include those elements. Also in correspondence, and I think it's a good area, this could maybe fit in a few different categories, but that constituent database administration is so important. We're going to touch on that a couple more times, of just having the data for your constituents, having it updated in a central clearinghouse. You might hear of it as a CRM, a constituent or a customer relationship management software, somewhere that you have inbound interactions with constituents. Maybe it's a phone call or an inbound email. You can be noting those things if there's follow-up or action points or triggering calendar events to follow up. Those are important elements to keep in mind. So having some central database that if an address changes, okay, how many different platforms does it need to change in? Making sure that there's a key person in charge of making sure that that is handled in the different areas. All right, then we're going to talk a little bit about the digital footprint. And again, this is just kind of making your brand come through in all the different spaces. And so just that consistency across social media and account platforms. So when we go back to a brand, there's really no right or wrong, but inconsistent is wrong. That you want to make sure that whatever you're doing, be consistent about it. Otherwise, it does look disorganized and haphazard. So even in the descriptions and the title and the @ handles and things like that of your social media accounts, make sure you give that the attention. Turn off the tabs that are irrelevant. Maybe you don't have recruiting needs or you don't have events. Make sure you shut those tabs off. Go through and do a diligent job of setting up your social media space to reflect you properly. You would spend a fair amount of time proofreading a new letterhead or a new business card. Spend the time to go through your social media accounts. Sometimes that gets discounted because, it's electronic, we'll just fix that later. Well, you might, but you might not. And then you've got egg on your face in the future when things are, in duplicate or nuanced differences between different descriptions of yourselves. And that goes for video channels as well. So you've got that space for descriptions and titles and things like that. And then all of those things kind of feed into your search engine optimization. So those SEO basics. This SEO can be, buco bucks, and you can be reformatting your website and your digital space significantly to really show up and be served by Google and Bing and DuckDuckGo and all the different search engines. But there's some basic things that you can put in place, and just having good quality content and information, even in your platforms and video channels, is a good way to put your best foot forward. So those search engines elevate you and promote you based on you wanting to help them help your traffic versus punishing you or suppressing you because you don't care enough to update your information. One thing I do want to touch on for websites, website is kind of a no-brainer. Everyone needs a website for their ministry, at least most do. But a lot of times people really overemphasize the need to be updating and to have that be, I don't want to say relevant, but the feeling that they need to be updating the website. Oh man, do we update the website? We have to put so much attention on that. And I really encourage people to treat it like a digital brochure more than an engagement tool. And I know that there's going to be exceptions. If you're generating a lot of content or have events or things where people are coming regularly to your website, that's something where that is important, but you don't reprint your brochures every 10 days or even every month or quarter. So you can treat your website, don't put too much undue pressure on yourself to keep your website updated and changing, ever changing and rebranded and relaunched every year. That's probably not necessary. You're probably not doing that to your other distributed or kind of, posted and published presences. And so I don't feel you need to do that for your website. Social media is probably a category all on its own, but I'm just going to kind of lump it in here with the digital footprint and just reminding people that there's a lot of tools, for post and article drip. It's kind of what I call it, where you can tee up a bunch and then just kind of every few days it posts or publishes on your behalf. There's some tools, there's Agorapulse, there's Hootsuite, there's a number of different ones where you can kind of tee those up and queue them. Even within the social media platforms, you can now kind of schedule a lot of those. And so use that tool. And as you use that tool, it gives you more lead time to then have it proofed and to have it be accurate in advance. So you're not scrambling, to replace content or have to be hawking your own content as it's released. It allows you to plan ahead, proof it, and so it's really ready. And of course, interactivity is powerful. That's where you're going to get more, kind of surges and interaction and engagement on social media. Posing questions, even if they're silly questions, people love to just chime in and throw their 2 cents in. And so feel free to find that balance of interactivity, polling, and things like that. Also for recruiting, we talked a little bit about our proofing. We put up, Outward Heart did a notice that we were looking for a proofreader to join our team. And now we've got, I believe, 7 or 8 proofers who are on our team. Well, that post got shared a couple of times and a complete stranger reached out and said, I'd love to proof with you guys. So we were excited. We're like, hey, outside eyes, perfect. And so don't discount the fact that you can be recruiting even through your social media as well. Then, of course, paid placements. There's no end to the paid placements. The one thing I would say on that is to make sure you keep an eye on it, to closely monitor those. The social media giants, they don't make money by reminding you to turn off your ads. And so while they have daily budgets and they've got time frames and time limits and things like that, that's not their priority. And so you need to make it your priority to make sure that doesn't run away with you, especially for things that are timely or, may expire in relevance. So keep in mind that you want to be watching that pretty carefully. Stationery and literature. I'm not going to get too deep here because everyone's going to have their own kind of needs or kind of their go-to tool belt. But what I want to talk about is the organizational system for them. And so all of the literature, this is just sort of my system. I've been using this for about 15 years of a prefix, suffix, kind of naming convention for everything produced, everything printed. And so in this case, an 03 brochure, and then 123 is the specific brochure. And so I'm going to show you what that looks like. So this would be just, right in my Finder window of my computer. So you can see the left column there is all of the categorical with that prefix, 1 are ads, 2 are stationery, 3 are brochures. And then within 3, you see, okay, these are all the brochures and they're by number. And then the kind of pull out bubble there with the purple, okay, newsletters. 04 is newsletter. And then that instance of the newsletter, that would be all of the design files, the assets, maybe a photo, it would be, the raw text, the approved text, all that kind of stuff, the PDFs, the versions for web and all that would reside in that folder. So it's all organized into that sort of nested sort of directory format. So I'd certainly encourage you to consider that. Then furthermore, all those publications should include that number. And so I'm kind of doing a zoom in there on 04056, that would be that newsletter. And that's literally printed right on the newsletter. So you can reference it as part of your inventory, as well as, hey, if you need to do a reprint or if someone's just vaguely referencing, the reach with the kids on the cover, well, they probably all have kids on the cover if it's for an orphanage. So you can say, okay, well, what is the number in the corner there? And then you can reprint that, or you can pull from inventory and get those in the hands of either your advocates who are speaking on behalf of your ministry, or if you need to do a reprint for internal reasons or whatever, you can always find that number. So if you're printing or producing something, your audience isn't going to care what that little 5-digit code is in 5-point font in the corner. It doesn't need to be pronounced or bold, but it needs to be legible. And that's a great way for you to reference internal documents. And it really does help. So I'd encourage you to do that. So I'll touch on campaigns just a little bit. Again, those are just kind of spikes throughout the year. I think of, again, I come from an orphanage ministry most recently, more formally. And so Orphan Sunday in November was always a big thing that we would align with and partner with the national organization of Orphan Sunday. And so, every November we would kind of be ramping up. And so that was that kind of a campaign, but maybe it's a capital campaign, maybe it's a special project or a new program you're launching. The main thing really is to have that data be solid on the front end so you can segment your audience. And we'll touch on this a little bit in the marketing as well. But segmenting your audience is so important that not all of your constituents are going to care about all of your campaigns. And so it's important for you to get a feel for, okay, what are the sort of compassion triggers for different audiences within our constituents, that you can't assume they all love everything that you do. Maybe they're really dialed in on the Bible translation component, or the whatever component is that maybe is part of your suite of what it is that your organization does. And so don't assume that everyone is going to care about everything that you put forth, but your metrics should start to learn that. And within your CRM, you should start to kind of see trends. And if you're going to launch a new campaign, hey, we need to launch it to these folks because we know historically that they care about that stuff. And then, of course, the 3 I's comes into play. You want to inspire. You don't want to lead with, hey, we're short this year on our budget shortfall. We need you to rally around us, or we don't know what the future is going to hold. That's a very different approach from, hey, look what God did this first 8 months of the year. And boy, this or this happened that put us in a difficult spot. That's that informed part. But now engage. Now, hey, you can help us meet that. You can ensure that those testimonies of the first 8 months can press on through the end of the year, and we can start out the year strong. So you can kind of reframe that again with those 3 I's, making sure that the ask is something practical and easy to engage with. Accounting, this is again, you probably have an accounting department, and it could be a whole separate, maybe you don't touch the accounting side, but just making sure that the implementation of your kind of processing, your donor modules, and that platform is plugged in properly, and the person who's doing your web and other digital kind of management has a good understanding of the processing buttons and things. On screen, you see a couple of just samples of giving buttons. There's a little nuance there of donate versus give. And so there's probably debate out there about which term do we use. A lot of the plugins and things default to donate, which has sort of that tax friendly approach. But I would say give is a much more spiritual approach, a much more of a theological, hey, we're sowing into, we're giving of ourselves. The word donate doesn't happen much in scripture. I think of donate as I donate my clothes to Goodwill. I don't think of, I want to give, I want to sow into ministries. And so just kind of that nuance, be mindful of your buttons, make them consistent, and make sure that your designer isn't just doing the defaults, but be intentional about even what does it say on the buttons, what color are the buttons, things like that. Planned giving is another area that a lot of younger or smaller ministries don't really have a great handle on, nor do they necessarily see the value of. But smaller ministries generally have a tighter knit group of supporters and advocates who really are on their team. And those kind of diehards are going to be the kind that would want to further their investment even beyond their life. And so you think of wills and living trusts or stock transfers and some of those kind of bigger level giving methods. It's not just for the rich or elite who deal in those spaces, but it is kind of a case-by-case basis for you. But there's different organizations that will come alongside, even your local bank or where you do your banking, or some of these other ministries will come alongside and help you receive and kind of manage those gifts. But of course, don't give up on the old school methods of giving, of just writing out a check. There's something about scribbling out your name and putting it in the mail. And so never give up on that. Always include a means and a method. As much as we're transitioning to a digital society, know that some people still will only give through a check. And so don't discount that, at least include that as part of your options. And then on the accounting side, getting some credibility endorsements and registrations is important. Hopefully it's not a deal breaker. If they're not on ECFA accredited ministry, I can't donate to them. You kind of hope that your audience doesn't draw that kind of a hard line, but to see a couple of those insignias on your website or on some of your publications may give donors the peace of mind that they need, just to kind of know that they're sowing into fertile soil and that there's credibility behind the ministry and the work that you say you do. Events aren't something that everyone does, but we've come alongside a number of different ministries who do hosting of fundraising events or just awareness events. It can be a make or break for impressions and precedents. And so be aware, don't just say, well, we'll do it this year this way, and then next year will be better, or this will be sort of a stepping stone. And I know you have to kind of grow in a way that is that you can handle and manage, but I would encourage you to over deliver. And that's not meaning, just kind of exorbitant, but just in a couple of areas. Maybe it's a little takeaway. It's something that the guests bring home with them or is waiting for them on their chair or at their seat at the table. Or maybe they're greeted with a plate of appetizers when they walk in the door to a banquet that they didn't know they were going to get canapes hand served, but all of a sudden that was fancy. That was cool, and so again, that's going to vary all over the place in terms of, sort of what is the feeling or the emotion of the atmosphere of the room that you want. But also the speaker does matter. And so as you're looking at events, if you don't have the woo or the inspirational leadership of your ministry, the good public speaker, you might want to bring someone in. You don't need to bring some heavy hitter, some, celebrity, but just someone who can really weave things together to help you tell your story, to help connect some of the dots for your audience. The speaker does matter. And another kind of logistical or sort of practical help, table hosts will fill a room much faster than individual ticket sales. So if you're hosting an event, it's a lot easier to fill a table of 8 or 10 than to sell 4 tickets for 2. Just kind of the practicality of the multiplying factor. It also then encourages maybe some of your more committed constituents to invite others. And now you get new and fresh names and people in the room who are hearing your message versus the same old, kind of your regulars just showing up and coming together. So table approach is great for events. And then an 8-to-1 ratio of invite to attendee. So if you want 100 people at your event, you better have a list of 800 to invite. It's just kind of a rule that we use. And if you want 1,000, scale it up. You need 8,000 invites. And so you just kind of have to work with some of the numbers game, just with availability and things. And that can improve over time as you get more and more commitment. And maybe as you've over delivered and you've had great speakers for the last 2 years. And yeah, you might inch that down into the 5-to-1 or 4-to-1 ratio. But again, at events, remember the 3 I's. Don't lead with your need, but rather lead with inspiration and what God is doing. So if you want to fill a room like this, you're going to have to invite hundreds of people to get, just the handful that are going to be available to participate. This list, we could probably fill this screen completely with logos of various tools. I'm just kind of sharing some of the economical and ones that we use as a startup ministry. We've been doing this a long time, but as our own ministry, we're on the cheap side of things. So ClickUp is a good time tracking tool that we use. It allows you to literally toggle off and on from different client space or different projects. So the minute you complete a meeting on one topic or task, you can check on to the next one, and now you're tracking that time. If there's one thing that can get away from just about everybody, it's their time. And so if you have this little tool in place, I found it to be really helpful. We don't invoice our clients or charge them for our services, but it does help just kind of establishing, okay, how much time are we spending on these projects, and just kind of giving you a better feel for that. Maybe you'll find that helpful as well. Bulk emailing services. This is more of that broadcast mail service. Maybe your CRM or your donor portal has some of that functionality. MailChimp is kind of the industry go-to for economics. There's also Constant Contact and others. Some of them are free, but then up to different thresholds. That's where the number of sends maybe kicks into more advanced features and things. But you're going to need some solution for bulk broadcast emailing. I talked a little bit about CRMs, kind of keeping tabs of all of your constituents, prospects, donors, attendees, things like that. Insightly is the one that we use. It's a free service. It's got pretty basic level tools. But then, of course, you can ratchet up with advanced things where that does have interactions with constituents. You can tag them, flag them, assign them, schedule them, and then you can be exporting from that directly for your marketing initiatives, your mailings, and things like that. There's also Salsa, there's Razor's Edge, they kind of ratchet up Salesforce. There's all these different tools that can really help you keep tabs of your donors and your database information. From a media perspective, a lot of people don't think of WordPress as being sort of their go-to, but there is 45 million websites built on WordPress. I was just reading an article just a couple of days ago, and there are 6 new WordPress posts every second. And so that is by no means a dying or a stagnant platform that a lot of bigger organizations are even using and leveraging the WordPress and its plugins to pretty large extents. And one thing that I like to consider for it is if you've got testimonials, or if you've got case studies, if you've got projects, whatever it is that you have kind of content that you need to sort of keep organized and maybe even collaborate with your team, WordPress is a great solution. Not just publicizing it like, okay, publish and post to web for the world to see, but you can just unpublish. And now all of a sudden that's a highly tagged, categorized by author, collaborative space for your content. And that's where you could send your proofing team to go look at it. And so don't discount WordPress because, our website is built on X, not on WordPress. Keep in mind that that's a good organizational and directory kind of use for some of your content as well. Synology is really the user platform or sort of the user interface for a hard drive or a network storage system or storage solution. And so if you've got photos or video projects or really any documentation, know that there's both cloud and there's local, and Synology would be a local solution to redundancy to make sure you've got backups of files and things like that. It's a system that we love using. All of our computers in the office can reference the same files. You can access it remotely. So it's not necessarily cloud because it still resides on site, but you can have the interface and access that from anywhere. So Synology's got some cool solutions out there. And even Google, if you're a nonprofit, a 501c3, Google has got some pretty nice tools, really robust platform functionality for you, and they make that available. It includes extra users, extra space for nonprofits, and so well beyond sort of the personal use that you might be familiar with for Google. Annual planning, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here other than keep in mind that as you have initiatives that are coming up either on an annual basis or you can anticipate, know that it's not just a one and done. You're going to need several touches on that same theme. Maybe it's through different formats. Maybe it's email, maybe it's snail mail, maybe it's social media and video releases, things like that. Know that you need to allow time for that production, and you should have that a plan going forward. End of year campaign, depending on what you read, what you see, organizations bring in 70 to 90% of their donations at the end of the year. And so have a plan. If it's June or July and you haven't thought about it, you need to get on your end of year planning. Don't come to November and realize, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? The end of the year is almost here, but be planning for that. Be looking at even budget shortfalls and or different campaigns or projects that the end of the year you may have a different audience or a more receptive audience to partnership financially, and so just kind of keeping that in mind. Equipment. So this is going to vary wildly as well from ministry to ministry. If you're doing a ton of video, you're going to need more video equipment, obviously. The one thing I would maybe point out is that wireless lapel mic. And it doesn't need to be wireless, I guess, but keep in mind that that's a great tool to capture a lot of kind of varying different scenes, whether it's an interview, whether it is you have an opportunity for your leader to speak at an event. You can even just kind of tag that on to get some of the audio recorded secondary versions of that. So anyway, know that that's a good way to capture that. A lot of people overlook the sound quality. And it's really the first thing the audience realizes. I mean, you start a movie, you're immediately, okay, turn it up. Okay, how's the bass? You're immediately scrambling for audio adjustments when you're watching something. And so be mindful of how are you capturing your audio. Don't cut corners there if you can help it. Again, the Synology system that does kind of fit in both categories because it's a software interface to a hardware system. But I'd recommend that you get some sort of on-site storage. Stewardship 101, it really fits into equipment. I feel that I think it's an area that a lot of people just kind of discount, or that, oh, we need this for this project, and they buy it up and they forget they bought it, or it gets misplaced or it gets broken or whatever. Stewardship really, especially for smaller ministries, I should say especially for, it should be for all, but if you're on a tight budget, you need to keep track of your stuff, your equipment. That's dollars out that you need to keep track of. And so I actually would suggest that you employ the same organizational system of prefix, suffix. Of, an 01 might be a camera, and a 004 might be, oh, that's the Canon, or that's the Nikon, whatever. And so really having that system, and I'll show you kind of a zoom in here, what that might look like. So again, just kind of, there's that code running down the edge. Of sort of that categorical, hey, what is the prefix and what is the suffix? And then you can kind of keep track too across the top of those categories of general description, specific description. Where is it? Where does that live in the phone booth, the audio booth, or does that in the media closet? What's the price you paid? Where's the owner's manual? Warranty information. If that's got a 5-year warranty, don't go 6 years before looking at it. Trigger a reminder. Okay, in 4 years or in 4.5 years, go dig out that radio and make sure that it's still functioning, so there's still time on that warranty. And of course, you'll need the date purchased to know that. But there's some things that we just kind of forget about, or we think, oh, we'll come back to do that, or we'll register it then. So that kind of stuff. Who received it? The estimated replacement date. So, okay, that tripod isn't going to last forever. How long will it last? Well, a tripod will probably last a year and a half, 2 years, depending on how much you use a tripod maybe, or, that camera technology, boy, we're going to want a new camera every couple of years. So put in there when you anticipate replacing that. Now you could come into your equipment needs, sort by equipment replacement date, and say, oh man, we've got some serious needs this year. We can share this with our constituents that, hey, we've got 15 items that we've identified are going to need replacing this year. And it's not a knee-jerk reaction then when something breaks or when something wears out. You've planned for it. And then, kind of review dates. Maybe you should go through your supplies closet every so often and just kind of say, okay, what's frayed? What zipper is broke? Is there any buttons missing? That kind of stuff. And noting that. So there's no surprises when you're grabbing your go bag to go on location or to go to a shoot or something like that. So again, use a system. This system seems to help me. And then of course, labeling is the last column there. Isn't labeled. And so print it out, print out a little label, stick it on there, put it on the cord, every cable, every adapter, put the number on there. And whether you're using a Sharpie or a Dymo printer, get your information on that equipment so you know where to find it and you can cross-reference its status. Marketing, I'm not going to camp out here a whole lot, knowing that that's a pretty vast area, but growing your audience is so critical. The more people that you can share what God is doing through, the more people are going to partner with you. They're going to encourage you. They're going to be praying, and they may be supporting financially. May they be joining you in your work. And so the best way to, of course, to do that is to segment your audience, knowing their compassion triggers, their past activity. And then, if they always respond to a certain kind of message or a certain medium, if they're always answering your emails, then make sure that when you have a new project or a new opportunity, you're sending it to them by email, making sure those who sent in checks are getting the paper version. Again, that goes back to your data, making sure that that's solid. Content is king in marketing. And so you want to make sure that your resources are thoughtful, intentional. And this is something too that I think, again, Heather, I was able to visit with her about, is using your content to disciple your audience. This isn't all about you. This is about you really being used by God to share what he is doing, telling his story, and just how important that is. And so often we get so internalized. We're like, okay, we have this project and we're doing this, we're doing that. But say, hey, but you know what, reader, this is a perspective that you could grow, or you could be on this journey. Maybe our initiative is opening your eyes to this, and maybe you need to step out and do X or Y, using your content to actually disciple others on their journey. It's not all about you. And so that's kind of a neat perspective to keep in mind as well. And again, in your marketing, the 3 I's, and that includes your social media everywhere, just making sure that you've got a holistic approach to what you're promoting and what your goals are. I think this is our last slide. So in-person advocacy is certainly something that, we live in a digital world, but at the end of the day, we're relational people, and there's only so much that can be done online or over, Zoom meetings, even like this, for example. So get your go-getter out there. Going back to the Strengths Finder, go find your woo. You probably know who they are already. They're your ones that are just, they can't say enough good things about what's going on in your ministry and what God is doing. Put them to work. Let them just kind of unleash them on the world. And there's no shortage of opportunities or networks. Maybe that is conventions. Urbana 22, that happens every 3 years. That's coming up this winter. And so if you haven't been to Urbana, that's 10,000 young people eager to find out what God has for them next. Get your storyline out there, whether you're exhibiting, whether you're just attending and networking. That's a great opportunity just to kind of get out there and get the right people there who can really connect some of those dots, connect some of the relationships. Maybe that's affiliate networks, maybe that's affiliations, denominations, different churches, things like that. Don't shy away from the in-person side of things. Get your people out there so they can be making a difference in spreading the word of what you're doing. So kind of in conclusion, remember, God will equip you for that which he has called you. And so, again, we don't want to take a position or a posture of desperation or of woe is you because you don't have the funds to do X or Y, but rather, hey, share what it is that God has laid on your heart, what he's calling you to, with the full belief that if he called you to it, that you're going to achieve that one way or another, as long as you continue to take steps of obedience. And so again, if you're not on board with maybe the leadership or the vision of the ministry you're with, you're probably going to be an obstacle to the goals being reached. That you need to not be a lemming and just be following lockstep. But boy, if you aren't on board with the vision, at least the foundational vision, you're going to likely be, you can't really fake it till you make it when you're speaking on behalf of a ministry and when you're sharing the heart of a ministry, if you're not there. And so nothing can hamper progress like doubt or desperation. And so it's important to have that perspective that, look, if God called you to it, if he calls Moses, if he calls Gideon, if he calls David, all these underdogs and scrappers, he equipped them. But the important part is that they walked and that they were patient. You know, David didn't assume the kingship on day two. He had to really tough it out, and he was obedient. He didn't take matters into his own hands. He knew God had a plan. He knew what God had anointed him and called him to. And so kind of going back to that, God looks at the heart, but man looks at the outward appearance. Keep in mind that that while you've got great heart work going on, God will help equip for that. And as long as we're obedient, that'll come to fruition and we'll bring him more glory. He'll be able to show off what he's done with so little as we're obedient and as we put what we have in his hands. So anyway, all that to say, I don't know that this matrix really illuminated too much for you, but if you can just kind of grab a couple of nuggets, if I can save you some wasted equipment, if I can save you some time, if I can save you just a few little things here and there, know that the entire matrix will be available. It's 160 some items or unique elements that, it's not a perfect list. It's just sort of what I've kind of grown and documented to share with you today. But anyway, I hope that's helpful to you. And if you've got questions, maybe you've been kind of sharing those with Heather throughout the session here, but maybe we have a little time for some questions, but I'm happy to share with you. And it was a privilege to be with you here today.
Thanks, Dave. This was a great overview of all kinds of different things that are helpful for people on a communications team. I have a follow-up question for you. And just as a reminder, as Dave has mentioned, I'll be watching the chat for your questions. So please feel free to post some more questions there. Dave, one thing that you didn't get into that I wonder if you have an opinion on is what kind of staff do you recommend that ministries consider? So let's say they have enough budget to hire 3 people, or they've got missionaries available who raise support and they have some communication skills. So if you had a staff of 3, what would you have them do?
Well, I think the important part is to know who are those 3, what are their strengths. So kind of going back to, sort of some of the tools and assessment things in place, find out, okay, are they a good communicator? Are they, where do they fit in those 34 strengths? And that's not it's a pretty robust list. It's not a complete list of, you're not going to put everyone in a bucket, but as you look at the matrix and say, okay, I know that so-and-so is wired like this. And you could maybe go through and rather than 1, 2, 3, those things, start putting initials next to them. And you're assigning, okay, hey, we've got a shortfall here. And hey, the common thread is that's really a creative role. Or, hey, the common thread here is we're just lacking someone to administrate all of this stuff, and so an administrator of, the graphic design side of things or the writing, they don't need to be a writer, but they need to have accountability. They need to step on some toes once in a while, maybe when they need to. And so just kind of assessing, okay, not so much, what is the title, but how are they geared? What kind of person is that? And how does that overlay with this matrix of the tasks and the kind of content we need to keep our eyes on? And so if there's some shortfalls or some holes there, you want to find someone, and don't be afraid to assess them or have them take the strength finder test before they even come on board to say, okay, are they going to fit both with your team in dynamics? And, the book looks at, kind of the positive side, the shadow side, who they pair well with. Know that there's that dynamic, but then there's also this giant list of items that does need to be handled. And so making sure you've got the right kind of people, because there's nothing more like drudgery than being put on a task that that is not my thing. I may be able to do that for a season, but I'm not going to do it well, and I'm going to burn out. And if it's not life-giving to me, and so it's going to be life-giving if it fits within your strength.
So it sounds to me like you're saying that you think that the personality and gifts that people come with is more important than their skills.
I think so. I think so. I think the skills can be learned,
Mhm.
but the types of tasks are going to fall within certain kind of personality types or certain strengths. And so I think it is important to find the right type of person for a task, knowing, okay, what does that daily look like? What does it look like when I'm writing all the time? That's gonna be the very much the wrong task for some people, but others are going to be, oh man, I just thrive on that, and hey, I just need to work with some creatives. And so you get those different people, and others like to just kind of live in their shell and make sure that everything is functioning properly. And so that's maybe the more that administrative side. So I do kind of fall in the more find the right skill sets versus training in certain things, knowing that training can be taught, but sort of a life approach and what gives them life or kind of drains them is going to be more problematic or more a solution long term.
I've got a question here from Stephanie. She says, with limited resources, should we focus more on digital marketing than print marketing? Ministry magazines, annual reports, our donors are from older generations to newer generations. So it's a range.
Sure. I think this is going to be the generic answer, but you need to have that balance. If you have an older constituency, I think using them to kind of say, hey, what is that legacy? Hey, we need to be thinking about and kind of be honest, be transparent with your constituents, saying, look, us as a ministry, and that includes you, our constituents, we're in this together, that we need to be thinking, we need to be proactive about the next generation. So how can we work together to do that? And giving them some either referral tools or giving them some resources to maybe help. So maybe you give your older audience tip them off with some, an engaging video or something that's maybe a little bit geared more to younger audience, or give them some tools to maybe use as an introductory piece of your ministry, to their loved ones or to others. And that's where, finding that sweet spot. Digital is going to be less expensive generally, that your touch points, but with less expensive comes much more volume, and so your inbox is going to fill up, and all of us have filters set to weed out the garbage, and it's going in spam. And so while digital may be inexpensive, it's also the easiest to ignore. And so I'm kind of a sucker. I come from the print era, and the print, I value print. I like to hold it. I like, oh, that one's got a nice finish, and maybe I'm kind of a design sucker, but I think there is something to that tactile. I've got young kids. I've got a 20 and a 22-year-old. Maybe that's not young kids, but they love when the Voice of the Martyrs magazine shows up at our door. They thumb through it, where if they get the email, they're probably not going to go clicking around, but there's something kind of nostalgic and very, okay, I'm investing time in this. I'm sitting down, I'm thumbing through something. So I do not discount the old media, the print. And so it is finding that balance. I know that's not a great answer probably, but making sure that you do provide materials in different formats so people can engage how they do. If you're chasing social media or relying on, just that super low hanging fruit of easy to post, there's probably not going to be the sticky, real interactive side of that you're going to benefit from, unless there's a deeper, more vested interest that they've got, that, that you are sharing some of the deeper stuff as well. It's not just all, verses and memes, but hey, here's an article that maybe does disciple them a little bit or helps them understand or open their eyes to a new perspective. So finding that balance, and all of the above is the answer, but that could come too in the fluency of your staff. So if you bring someone on to know that, hey, okay, you're good at this, let's put them in that sweet spot and let's let them be really engaging on social media, and they may really move the needle for you. But with the small staff, you have to kind of pick your battles, and that's where maybe our list, maybe it's too much top heavy of, hey, these are all the things you need to be doing, but kind of pick some high priority items and focus on doing those well.
I've got a couple of other questions here. One from Daryl. He says, any tips on building bridges, so relational, logistic, and organizational ones, between the communications department and other parts of an agency?
There we go. I think the more that they can be sewing into, and I don't have a ton of experience here because generally I've been on pretty small teams, but I think the more vested or the more ownership they have in the process, they're going to build more of those bridges. If they are helping part of the brainstorming, the idea stage, and that may be, hey, we're having an all staff brainstorming session after hours for an hour. I'm bringing in pizza and let's just get the whiteboard full or the chalkboard full of ideas for X or Y. You might get some accounting people, you might get some of the other teams involved, and now all of a sudden they see some of their ideas getting the light of day. That's kind of cool. And they might start telling their friend, they'll come to the next meeting for sure that you do, next quarter when you're brainstorming something. So it doesn't need to soak up a bunch of time to involve others, but involving others in the process, I think, is going to help them kind of feel a little sense of ownership, and they're going to be more likely to share your social media post even within like the organization. I've been in organizations where I'm not even going to share the social media post because it's kind of weird, or I don't agree with it, and so the more that they have weighed in at the top end, when that gets the light of day, they're going to be, hey, yeah, that was me, or that's the thing I told you about, or look what happened. And so people will take a little bit of that pride of ownership if they can be part of the process. And then I think at the end of the day, it is about respect. And I think the more you can communicate the fact that, hey, we all have different strengths. Accounting department, if it's that a bigger organization, accounting department, here's how we need to relate, because the book says us as a bunch of creatives, this is how we can best relate to you. And just kind of having that open dialogue to understanding the strengths. Those strengths aren't just interdepartmental. They can be, with your whole organization as well. And so know that, just understanding the strengths, communicating and knowing that, okay, I'm showing this to so-and-so, and they're probably not going to see it the way I do because they're uniquely wired, they're uniquely designed, and they're going to have different strengths. And so I think communicating, being aware of those strengths, have everyone in the building, have everyone in the organization take a strengths finder, and it might open up some new conversations and new discussions where there'll be less judgmental kind of airs. There'll be less pride. It'll be like, okay, look, they're working in their strength. That's not mine, but I'm at least aware of it now. Or, hey, I know the shadow side of that kind of a strength can be this. And so I can really minister to them, or I can encourage them over here, knowing that they probably need it. And so those are kind of some ways that maybe addresses that concern or that question.
So this next question is related to that one. I'll read you the whole thing and you can kind of add on to what you've been saying if there's anything more specific that you want to say. So this is from Beverly. Any tips for collaborating well with others in your organization outside the communications team, for example, the recruiting staff, and helping them understand the value of adhering to branding guidelines and of working with the communication staff to create materials that they need rather than going rogue and doing it on their own?
That's the worst.
This is like the communications department's like right there, and it happens a lot.
It is. It's a process. And I think the more you talk about it, and I think the way you talk about it, I think, even the idea of our ministry name, Outward Heart, know that, look, you may have the best of intentions, you may have the best heart, if they're a woo or they're out there, as maybe the public face of the ministry, but that doesn't mean you have the way to get it out there. You may have to rely on the professionals to get that out. And so I know that you have to do that in love, because it's going to come across as judgmental, like, hey, you don't know how to do this. But at the end of the day, look, that is our strength. And if you are rolling rogue, that's taking life away from us, because it's life-giving to really curate, and it's life-giving to work within our strength. And we know that your strength is X and ours is Y. And so know that we're doing all we can to make sure that you can work within your strength, but we need to honor each other's strengths. And so I think communication is going to be key, and understanding kind of where they come from. And again, going back to that kind of strengths assessment, realizing, okay, that kind of person is probably wired like X, and you don't want to put people in buckets, but at the end of the day, that's what the psychologists have done. So we can work with that, and so just understanding, okay, look, this is probably going to be the tension that we have. So how do we do that gracefully? How do we listen and provide the resources that are needed. But at the end of the day, sometimes it does take a little bit more of a heavy hand. It needs someone who isn't afraid to say, you know what, that's great, but we're not a grassroots, we're not a fledgling, we are an established, credible, this is our brand, this is who made us, this is our identity. And our identity is divine in a lot of ways, whether we're talking humanity or we're talking a ministry that the Lord has given us to curate. And so know that our identity is something that we truly do cherish, and that needs to be respected. And so at the end of the day, someone might have to be the meanie and say, you know what, nope, you got to take that down, or get that post down, or change your email signature, because that is not how we do our logo. It just makes it look like you're in Microsoft Word, putting all the blinking and spinning effects on it. And we don't do that. And I'm sorry, but that's the policy. And sometimes it needs to go above them to let it kind of cascade down, and your leadership is going to set the stage. So if the director or the leader of your organization says, hey, we're excited about this, all of a sudden now it's no longer two, I'll say, peers kind of throwing barbs, but rather if you can get the leadership to understand the importance of brand and identity, it's going to kind of cascade down. And if they don't see violations to the rule book coming from leadership, they're less likely to kind of go rogue on their own. So that'd be a couple of different approaches or different comments on that.
Let me just follow up on the first question that I asked with just a different take on that. I know that there's a lot of ministries looking at what can they outsource and what do they need to keep in-house.
Sure.
So if we're looking at just the skill areas like writing and social media and design and video skills, is there any one of those things where it's better to have somebody in-house doing it than to outsource it or use an external volunteer or something?
I think the more you can package it up, the bigger the project, kind of the more you can outsource it, because there's a greater lead time generally. That if you are, kind of posting on social media, or you're doing something, an article for the next issue, which comes out shortly, you probably don't have the lead time to find or hire a writer and vet and, kind of do the back and forth. Whereas if you've got a program or a campaign that's going to be starting in 5 months or in 8 months, now you can kind of say, okay, what are the components? And maybe you can outsource pieces of that, but it's part of a bigger system, or it's something that can be packaged up and there's more lead time. So in some sense, sort of that lead time is important to consider. But then also, having a writer or someone who's truly generating content, even in videography, telling the story in a way that's consistent with your brand, you better have a lot of faith in that person, or they have to be very familiar with your storyline and your kind of demeanor, your posture as a ministry to speak on your behalf, or you need to be ready to mark that up or to kind of go back and forth a fair amount. And so maybe that doesn't necessarily answer your question, but I would avoid, some of the writing and actual content generation, but implementation can certainly be done. But then it really comes down to administrative, and that administrative person has to have a pretty thick skin and a pretty assertive personality to make sure that what's produced isn't good enough, but rather, yes, that hits the mark. And if things are falling behind deadline or something, you need that administrative person who can apply that accountability at a pretty high level. And so know that you could probably outsource just about everything, but then that's an administrative task that you really need to keep your eyes on. And so if you're not that administrative, you're going to need someone, maybe you need to hire an administrator who really just all they do is keep track of the matrix and who's doing what and stuff like that. And so, a lot could be outsourced, but that just really tips the scale onto the administrative side of making sure that it stays on brand, it stays on message, and that deliverables are on time and in a way that are suitable to the organization.
All right. Well, we're going to have to wrap up. Thank you very much, Dave, for all that you shared. I'm going to turn my camera off so we can do our closing.
All right.
We'll be taking a break from this webinar series for the summer. We look forward to seeing you again in August with another topic related to marketing and communications. Stay tuned for more information on that. Until next time, I encourage you to consider joining the Communications Director and Staff cohort, which you can find under the program and cohort menus on the Missio Nexus website. This will enable you to connect with other people engaged in marketing and communications. Thank you also to all of you who joined and participated with us. I'm Heather Pubels, along with Mary Kay, our producer.